My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 39 years old. But to understand what happened 22 years later, you have to go back to one night in Houston when I was just 17. I can still see the living room in sharp detail, the beige carpet, the framed photographs lining the mantel, and the soft hum of the ceiling fan that did nothing to cut through the heavy silence. My hands shook as I held the pregnancy test out toward my parents. The tiny pink line blurred as tears filled my eyes. My father, Charles Carter, a man who prided himself on running his small construction business like an empire, barely looked at me before his face hardened. His voice was a knife. You've disgraced this family. Do you know what people will say when they find out? My mother, Lorraine, didn't shout. That almost made it worse. She sat back on the sofa, crossed her legs, and studied her freshly painted nails as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. We expected better from you. Emily, not this mess. You've ruined our name. The clock ticked. I felt as if time had stopped. My father's hand reached up to adjust his gold watch, the same gesture he made whenever closing a business deal. Except this time, I was the failed deal. You are no daughter of ours anymore, he declared, cold and final. He didn't even look at my face when he said it. They gave me 15 minutes to pack. 15 minutes to erase 17 years of being their child. I remember my mother walking to the mantel, picking up our family portrait, and turning it face down. The soft click of the frame against the wood sounded like a verdict, sealing my fate. I stuffed a few shirts into a backpack, slipped in my journal, and grabbed the silver necklace I had hidden in the back of my drawer. When I tried to hold on to the photo of my grandmother and me, my father ripped it from my hand and tossed it back onto the shelf. That stays here, he snapped. When the front door shut behind me, the lock clicked with a finality that shook me to the bone. The humid Houston air pressed down on me as I stood on the porch, backpack straps cutting into my shoulders. I wanted to believe I still had Jordan, my boyfriend, the boy who had once whispered under the stars that he'd never leave me. But I would learn soon enough that promises spoken under starlight mean nothing in daylight. That night, standing alone, I swore silently. If they thought I was ruined, I would build a life so untouchable they would one day beg for what they had thrown away. The Houston streets were not kind to a 17-year-old girl with nothing but a backpack and a heart full of fear. I spent the first night on the steps of an old church, clutching the straps of my bag so tight my hands ached. By the second night, I had migrated to the benches outside a 24-hour gas station, where the buzz of fluorescent lights and the smell of diesel mixed with my hollow stomach. People passed me with quick glances, some shaking their heads, others staring as if I were invisible. Each look cut deeper than the last. The air was sticky with summer humidity, yet I shivered under the thin jacket I wore. On the third dawn, exhaustion hit me like a hammer. My legs trembled as I sat outside a diner on Westheimer, the aroma of frying bacon seeping through the glass. I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days, and the hunger made my vision blur. I told myself not to cry, but tears spilled anyway, hot streaks down my dirt-stained face. That was when I heard a low, steady voice. You're freezing out here, young lady. You need a meal. I looked up and saw him, an older man, perhaps in his 70s, with a weathered face softened by kind eyes. He wore a grey wool coat, too heavy for the Texas morning, and held a small paper bag in one hand, the leash of a golden retriever in the other. His name was Raymond Holt. He didn't ask me why I was there, didn't lecture me, didn't demand explanations. He simply crouched down, set the paper bag beside me, and added, "No questions asked. Just eat." Inside was a warm buttered roll and a bottle of water. The moment I bit into it, my chest cracked open and sobs tore out of me. He didn't flinch. He just sat quietly, letting me cry. the dog resting its head against my knee as if to remind me I wasn't alone. Raymond didn't rescue me with promises. Instead, he made a phone call that morning that would change my life forever, one to his late wife's sister, Margaret Pierce, a woman who owned a chain of bakeries in Dallas. That call was the first flicker of hope, the first sign that my story wasn't ending on a cold bench. It was just beginning. When I first met Margaret Pierce, I didn't know if I should be terrified or relieved. She arrived in a sleek, dark sedan outside the Houston diner where Raymond had found me. Her hair was silver, tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and her posture radiated authority. She stepped out wearing a tailored coat, eyes sharp as they scanned me up and down. "So this is the girl?" she asked Raymond, her voice crisp but not unkind. I lowered my gaze, bracing for judgment. But instead, she sighed, pressed a set of car keys into his hand, and said, "Bring her bag. She's coming with us." Margaret owned a chain of bakeries in Dallas, a business she had built from the ground up after her husband passed. Her reputation was one of elegance mixed with iron will. She didn't waste words, but every gesture seemed deliberate. That first night, she placed me in a small room above one of her bakeries, a narrow bed, clean sheets, and the faint scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. I cried myself to sleep. Not from fear this time, but from relief. The next morning, she set an apron on the counter and said, "If you want to stay, you work." I worked. I scrubbed pans until my arms ached, mopped floors until my knees throbbed. But Margaret noticed something in me, my hunger to learn. By the second week, she was showing me how to measure ingredients, how to calculate margins, how to manage suppliers who always tried to overcharge. "Listen carefully," she said one evening as we sat in her office surrounded by invoices and ledgers. "People will underestimate you. They will dismiss you as weak. That is your advantage. Let them. And then, when the moment is right, prove them wrong." Those lessons went far beyond flour and sugar. Margaret was teaching me strategy, patience, and something far more powerful than revenge control. She believed that real payback wasn't shouting or breaking. It was building. "Build a fortress," she told me, tapping her pen against a ledger, "so strong that no one who hurt you can ever tear it down." In time, she introduced me to her lawyer, Victor Lane, a man with sharp eyes and a calm manner. He taught me about contracts, trusts, and the law's ability to protect or destroy. I soaked up every word. And then came Nora Whitfield, Margaret's niece, who worked at the bakeries. She had quick hands on a keyboard and a mind that seemed to live 10 steps ahead. Together, we formed something I hadn't had in years, a circle, a shield, a family not tied by blood, but by choice. I didn't know it yet, but the tools they were giving me would become the very weapons I needed when the past came back clawing at my door. For a while, I believed I could carry the weight of it all, the long shifts, the aching back, the morning nausea that came and went like waves. But life is rarely so merciful. I still remember the sterile white walls of the clinic, the doctor's quiet tone as he said the word I feared most, miscarriage. My world shattered in silence. I had clung to that unborn child as my last link to hope. And suddenly, even that was gone. Margaret sat beside me in the dim recovery room, her hand firm on mine. She didn't tell me to stop crying. She didn't tell me it would be all right. She just stayed, her presence anchoring me in a storm that threatened to pull me under. That night, while I lay curled on the small bed above the bakery, she came in carrying a cup of chamomile tea. She set it down and said softly, "Blood may betray you, Emily, but family can be chosen. Remember that." Those words planted a seed. Weeks later, Margaret drove me to a shelter in Dallas she often supported. The sound of crying children filled the halls, a chorus of both sorrow and resilience. She guided me to a crib where a baby boy no more than 3 months old stared up at me with wide, curious eyes. His tiny fist grasped my finger with startling strength, as if daring the world to let go. His name had been undecided at the shelter, but the moment I saw him, I whispered, "Ethan." It meant resilience, survival, a second chance. Adopting him wasn't easy, but Margaret's connections and Victor's legal expertise cleared the path. Within months, Ethan Carter was mine. Not a reminder of what I had lost, but proof of what I could still build. I poured everything into him. When he was old enough, I enrolled him in robotics camps, computer classes, math programs. While other kids were playing tag, Ethan was tinkering with circuits and building programs. By 10, he had coded his first simple app. By 12, he was solving problems that adults couldn't. Margaret often smiled as she watched him. "He's your fortress. Emily," she said once. "The proof that what was taken from you can be reborn stronger." And she was right, with Ethan beside me. I no longer felt like the girl abandoned on a Houston street. I was becoming someone else, someone ready to face the past, when it dared to return. By the time Ethan turned 19, the boy with curious eyes had become a young man who caught the attention of the Texas business press. One of his projects, a piece of software that streamlined hotel reservations, got picked up by a local tech blog. Within a week, the headline "Dallas Prodigy, creates system that could change hospitality forever" was bouncing across social media. I watched from the sidelines, equal parts proud and cautious. Because I knew what success did, it drew moths to flame. And I was right. A sleek package appeared at my office one morning, wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a brand new laptop with a note written in a hand I recognized but hadn't seen in over 2 decades. For our brilliant grandson, it's time to reconnect. With love, Dad and Mom. Love. The word looked poisonous in their script. I returned the package the next day, adding a note of my own. "I can't accept this. It brings back too many painful memories." I deliberately wrote with a trembling hand, the letters uneven, as if the past had left me fragile. It didn't take long for the calls to start. First voicemails, then emails. Promises of reconciliation. Invitations to sit down like a family. The words were sugar-coated, but I could hear the clink of greed beneath every syllable. Nora, sharp as ever, traced their online activity. She intercepted search histories filled with phrases like grandparent visitation Texas and inheritance rights, estranged child. She even found threads they'd posted anonymously in forums, asking how to secure a stake in an adult child's success. The more I resisted, the hungrier they became. My refusals were gasoline on their fire. And then, as if summoned by their schemes, Jordan Hale appeared again. The boy who had once whispered promises under the stars now stood outside Ethan's office building, waiting, smiling the same sly smile. He called himself Ethan's father. He said he only wanted what was right. It was working. The bait had been taken. The trap was almost ready to snap shut. Once Jordan reappeared, I knew the moment had arrived to draw every snake out of the grass. I wasn't going to fight them head on. I would let their greed turn them against each other. With Nora's help, I created a set of anonymous emails. The first went to my parents. It hinted that Jordan was quietly skimming from the reunion fund they had set aside to win Ethan over. "Watch your partner." The email read, "He's bleeding you dry." The second email went to Jordan. It suggested that Charles and Lorraine had no real intention of sharing Ethan's future success with him. "They've already decided to cut you out once the money is secure." It didn't take long for the sparks to catch. Victor, my lawyer, intercepted angry voicemails, my father accusing Jordan of betrayal. Jordan firing back with venom, my mother's voice rising in shrill panic as she demanded control. Every word was documented, recorded. and safely stored. Meanwhile, I played my part. I answered their calls with a fragile tone, always sounding just shy of breaking. "I am not sure I am ready, it's all too painful," I murmured into the phone, making them believe I was still the lost, trembling girl they once discarded. The more vulnerable I acted, the bolder they grew. Soon their true colors began to bleed through. Jordan left me a voicemail, his voice oily with false warmth. "Emily, think of Ethan's future. I am his father. After all, don't shut me out." He had no idea that statement alone was the rope tightening around his neck. My parents escalated from persuasion to threats. "If you don't give us access, well, sue." My father barked in one message. "We have rights as grandparents." But they didn't know what Margaret had left behind: signed documents, airtight trusts, recordings of conversations where she warned of this very day. Nor did they know that every step they took was being monitored by Nora's network of trackers. Their desperation was painting them into a corner. They whispered of lawsuits and settlements, but they were only walking straight into my courtroom trap. I no longer saw the girl they threw out at 17 when I looked in the mirror. I saw a strategist, a mother, a woman sharpening the blade of patience. The past had returned, clawing for my son's light, and I was ready to let the world watch them burn themselves alive with their own greed. The Dallas Innovation Expo was packed to the rafters, cameras flashing from every angle, the air charged with anticipation. Tech entrepreneurs, investors, and reporters filled the hall. At center stage stood Ethan, sharp in a tailored blazer, his voice steady as he spoke about loyalty, resilience, and building technology that served people, not just profit. But I hadn't brought my parents and Jordan here to applaud his brilliance. I had brought them here to watch their empire of lies collapse in front of the entire city. They sat in the front row, Charles in a suit he could barely afford now, Lorraine stiff beside him, and Jordan grinning like he belonged. They didn't notice the extra cameras aimed their way, or the 2 security officers posted near the aisle. Halfway through Ethan's keynote, the giant screen behind him flickered. Gasps rippled through the audience as Margaret Pierce's face appeared, recorded years before she died. Her voice was clear, cutting through the silence. "Family is not who claims you when you shine. A family is who stands beside you when you are broken. And cowards who discard their children have no right to return when fortune arrives." The room hushed. I glanced at my parents, Lorraine's lips pressed thin, Charles shifting in his chair, Jordan looking uneasy. Then Victor Lane, our lawyer, walked on stage carrying a leather folder. His calm voice filled the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to share a document signed 22 years ago." Projected on the massive screen were the words in black and white. "We, Charles Carter and Lorraine Carter, relinquish all rights to our daughter, Emily Carter, and any offspring, born or unborn." Their signatures glared at them from 20 feet tall. The audience gasped. Phones shot up to record. Whispers surged like a wave. But it wasn't over. Nora's slides came next, intercepted emails and voicemails. One after another appeared on the screen, my father writing about leveraging the boy's fame, Lorraine scheming about inheritance law, Jordan begging for a payout in exchange for staying quiet. Each message stripped another layer of their polished facade until nothing was left but greed, exposed under fluorescent light. And then it was my turn. I stood, turned to face them, and spoke into the microphone with a calm I had sharpened for years. "You demanded access to my child," I said evenly. "But the truth is, there was no child back then. I lost that pregnancy because of your cruelty. Ethan is not your grandson. He is my adopted son, raised with love you could never understand." The crowd erupted, some in sympathy, others in outrage. Reporters scribbled furiously. My parents' faces drained of color. Jordan slumped in his chair. That was the final strike. Victor stepped forward again. effective immediately. Restraining orders are issued against Charles and Lorraine Carter and against Jordan Hale. They are barred from any contact with Ethan or Emily Carter. Security moved in. Cameras rolled as my parents and Jordan were escorted out of the hall, heads bowed, faces pale, drowned in a storm of whispers and judgment. I didn't feel rage. I felt something colder, sharper satisfaction, not because I had shouted them down, but because they had destroyed themselves, and all I had to do was let the truth shine. The video of my parents being escorted out spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, clips trended under hashtags that paired our family name with words like betrayal and greed. By the end of the week, 3 of their longtime business partners had pulled out of contracts. By the end of the month, Charles Carter was ousted from his own company's board. Their reputation in Dallas, once polished and untouchable, collapsed overnight. They sold their house at a loss and moved into a cramped apartment in Fort Worth, whispers following them wherever they went. Former friends avoided them in grocery store aisles. The empire they had prized above me had turned to dust in their hands. Jordan Hale fared no better. Nora's evidence trail connected his name to hidden accounts and fraudulent filings. The IRS investigation hit him like a hammer. He faced not just back taxes, but potential prison time. The man who once told me I ruined his future was now begging lawyers to save him from losing his own. And me? I was done living in their shadow. I poured my energy into the Pierce Foundation for Young Mothers, created in Margaret's honor. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I looked out at rows of young women holding their children, their faces carrying the same fear and fire I had once carried. Behind me stood Ethan, taller now, steady, his hand on my shoulder. Victor was there too, the man who had guided me through storm after storm that day. As cameras clicked, I took a small box from my pocket and turned to him with a smile. Victor, will you make this family official? His grin spread wide as he said, yes. And the crowd erupted in applause. For the first time in decades, I felt whole. Looking back, I realized revenge had never truly been about destroying my parents. It was about building a fortress of my own, brick by brick, until nothing they did could ever touch me again. The lesson I carry is this: blood is not always family. Family is chosen, forged in loyalty and love, proven by those who stand with you when you have nothing. My parents taught me cruelty, but Ethan, Margaret, Nora, and Victor taught me strength, and that strength became the justice they never saw coming.